Hi, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for
Hi.
coming to our awesome panel with all these awesome ladies.
Yes.
So I guess we'll just get right into it. So to start off, just to quickly introduce myself. So my name is Kelly Wallach. I am the CEO and founder of the Indie Mega Booth, which is a showcase for independent game developers. We also help to create networks that support indie developers getting their games out there and getting the help that they need. I'm also the chairman of the Independent Games Festival, which is an award ceremony for independent game developers held each year at GDC. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to go down the line here and have everybody introduce themselves, but then also because I'm fun and this is going to be a fun panel, I have a
Yes.
little extra thing that I'm also going to ask.
Fantastic.
And the thing that I want to ask is, so to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself, and then is there like a song or a piece of art or a podcast or something that you've come across recently that's really resonated with you?
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that is fun
Okay.
because I'm fun.
So my name is Robin Hunnicky. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a studio in San Francisco called Phenomena, spelled F-U-N-O-M-E-N-A. And I make video games. I've been making video games for about 20 years, and I do a lot of advocacy for women in games. The last console game I released was Journey, which is probably the game that I'm most famous for releasing. And I'm just getting ready to release Watam, also for the PlayStation, so that's exciting. And the thing that has been inspiring me the most lately is Cardi B's album, Invasion of Privacy, which is just badass. And I went to see the Adrian Piper exhibit at the MoMA in New York twice, actually, in the last month. And if you have a chance to go see it, it's amazing. It's called A Synthesis of Intuitions, and it's about representation of blackness and feminism in a society where a lot of people are oppressed. And it's just a fantastic exhibit. It's on the top floor. She has the whole floor, and then they also have a big piece in the atrium. And she was just like a really amazing artist and someone that everyone should know about. So that's what's been rocking my world lately.
Awesome, thank you. All right.
Hi, I'm Carol Shaw. I'm the Vice President of Development for Double Fine Productions, which is a small independent game studio in San Francisco. I have been in games and technology since 1996, and I've been doing video games since about 2003. I was at Maxis for a long time, working on things like The Sims and SimCity and Spore. The thing that has I found inspiring recently as I listen to a podcast, I always listen to this podcast called 99% Invisible. It's about design and how design is mostly invisible to you unless it's bad, and then you kind of notice it more. But one of the pieces of design they were talking about were curb cuts, which are the part of the street where if you're in a wheelchair, you can get up onto the sidewalk. And I didn't realize this, but like before 1965 or so, there were no curb cuts. Curbs just ended. And then there was a guy named Ed Roberts, and he went to Berkeley, and he really moved the disability rights movement forward. And the thing that I found interesting is that now curb cuts and places where you can roll your suitcase up on a sidewalk very easily, or you can roll your baby carriage up on a sidewalk very easily. And all of that started because of a disability rights. And the thing that I found impactful about that, and why I keep thinking about it and going back to it, is it was created for one reason, and now it's used by a broad group of people for many, many reasons. And I think that that's often something that happens with change, is that it starts for one reason, and then it becomes useful to lots of different people. And I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of how the game industry's been evolving.
That's awesome, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Really amazing. My name is Siobhan Reddy. I'm the studio director at Media Molecule. We're like really, really busy at the moment, so I have been.
You're
like,
making
my,
dreams.
my escapism has been like going to look at trees.
Yes.
You know
like
what? I'm totally
escaping
fine with
technology.
resonating with trees. I'm super into that.
So I really like going out into the woods. And my like guilty pleasure podcast right now is Australian True Crime.
All right.
Which actually is really, really, really interesting, mainly because it's sort of talking to a lot of detectives, and there's a particular there's a lot of brilliant highlighting of women detectives and the journeys
cool.
that they have actually been on, and how challenging being a detective has been throughout the 60s, the 70s, and up till now. So, like, whilst it's a guilty pleasure, it actually also is really inspiring to hear these stories. And there's this woman, Narelle. And I freaking love Narelle. Narelle is just like the stories that she has and how she talks about her career is really brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with me. Yeah, and so for me, there's a podcast. I actually don't really like podcasts all that much, but there's a podcast that I've really been loving. It's called the TED Radio Hour, and they take a handful of TED Talks, like 4 or 5 TED Talks, and then they kind of weave together a narrative on things that seem like they would be kind of disparate from each other. And one of the ones that I had listened to recently was what makes good leadership, and what makes good leadership, particularly in a social movement or a revolutionary kind of way. And what I really got out of it, and what multiple people had said in it, is that something that makes a really strong leader that seems to get a movement going. I mean, obviously there has to be something that a lot of people are very passionate about that they want to move forward, but those leaders tend to provide a really positive vision of what the future could be. And that is really powerful. So it's like, the I have a dream speech. Or it's like giving people like, Martin Luther King Jr. is like, you picture a little black boy and a little white boy holding hands in a playground. Everybody understands what that means and they want to work towards that. And then the people underneath them take that idea and that concept and it gives them something positive to work for. And then they make the changes that lead to this bigger kind of vision. So it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And so kind of on that note, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions that are positive about what are positive visions that you have of the future. Because I think there's a lot of things, we all kind of have ideas of like what's wrong or what's not working or what we're against, but like what are we all working for and what does that look like? So all my questions are going to kind of be based around that.
Sounds great.
So starting off on that, so the very first question I have is, if we want to do this, if you kind of want to go down the line and have everybody answer it, if you want to do some back and forth, but I figure that would be easiest. So what's a way that you feel supported at your studio, and or what is a way that you feel that you support other people at your studio?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel supported at Phenomena because everybody at Phenomena understands that I'm doing the best that I can. And I have never been a CEO before. It's the first time I've ever done it, and I've been doing it for almost 6 years now. So that's encouraging. Like still making it work. But they're really supportive of me being able to admit when I don't know what I'm doing and when I make mistakes. And I feel that because I can be vulnerable with them when I'm like I'm getting ready to come to E3 and I'm going to do this huge pitch and I'm really nervous and what if it doesn't go through? I get these little text messages from people on my team being like, "You're going to slay. You're going to crush it. Nice. You're doing awesome. We love you. Thanks for the raise," stuff like that. And then I'm like, "I'm a badass. I can totally do this. I'm like literally Beyonce, and I walk into my meeting and I crush it. I'm not literally Beyonce. I wish I was. Because she doesn't have to pitch anybody anymore. But we are all Beyonce inside.
And you wouldn't be having to ask for money.
Exactly.
Probably.
I wouldn't have to be asked for money. I'd be like this. But it's nice to feel like my vulnerability about not knowing encourages them to encourage me, but also when they have problems or things that they can't do or they're not feeling up to coming to work today or whatever, they just let me know and then it's okay. So I think being vulnerable makes a safe space and it also makes an encouraging space for me.
That's amazing. That's great. Yeah.
I've been at Double Fine for about a year and a half, and I've been feeling really supported both by our founder, Tim Schafer, as well as all the teams I get to work with and all the leaders I get to work with within the company, because I've never done my job either. This is a new role for me, and I've been feeling extremely supported in I go and say, like, I'm not exactly sure how to do this thing, and I have like 6 people who are like, we haven't done it either, but we'll talk you through it and we'll figure it out together. And I don't feel like there has been a moment where anybody has ever said like, oh, you probably can't do this, maybe somebody else should take it on. It's been just a really encouraging environment. And I think some of that's because it's such a creatively driven studio that everybody really feels focused on thinking about like, how do we come up with solutions to problems we didn't even know we were going to have? And that's just a really inspiring group to be around. I see people do it as individual contributors every day, and I feel inspired to do it as a manager.
Yeah, I mean, I feel supported by the fact that I think that people ask each other at Media Molecule if they're okay, and we have these moments where you'll just notice that someone doesn't look 100%, and the fact that people take the time to say, "Are you okay? Like, do you need a cup of tea? Like, can I get you anything?" I think that actually is really brilliant, and it's all throughout the studio. I actually feel also really supported by the fact that we can talk very openly about our reproductive health and how challenging that is, and that not every day, like some days are actually really difficult, and I suffer endometriosis. So like the fact that I'm able to have these conversations and find that like as women within the workplace, it's one of the things that we don't always get to talk about. And within our group, we have sort of really started to make sure that we support each other through the big bleed.
Through the big bleed.
One of the things I feel like I've been doing to support the staff around me too is we've really been trying to expand our benefits program so that, you know, when somebody, like we just made it so that anybody who becomes a parent by whatever method they become a parent gets 16 weeks of paid time off.
That's great.
And that's new, and we're a really small company, and that was a really expensive
it's really-
decision.
Yeah.
But it also makes me feel like we have a lot of people with kids. We have a lot of people who want kids. We have a lot of staff that's more senior and more mature. And it was just a way we could say, we can't, you know, pay you as much as Facebook, but we can certainly help you have benefits that are going to help you have the work-life balance that we think you want to have.
Yeah, we do a similar thing, and we also really encourage people when the babies are small, if they need to bring them into the office. We're dog-friendly office as well, so, you know, and whenever there's a baby around, it makes the office so much more fun.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of babies in the office.
Yeah, and me too. I think that's one of the things, like all three of our studios are actually, we ask a lot of the people within the studios to do very creative things. And so it's very much about like coming into work and like, you know, being able to just come up with magical, brilliant ideas every day. And that's really tough. And I think one of the mechanisms we all have are these things. You know, we can't pay, you know, some of the huge, you know, some of those things,
Yeah.
but what we can do is have family first studios. What we can do is make sure that every single person is treated with respect. What we can do is make sure that family first doesn't just mean having kids. It also means that it can
Yes.
be just having a life. And I think that those things are just super important to make sure that people are treated individually with respect, such that when they come to work, they're getting there's a fair the deal. There's a balance there. It's a fair deal.
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of reminds me of like conversations that you've had and talks that you've given talking about like basically you bring your whole self to work.
Yeah.
You know, and I think especially for me, like my background is in the sciences, and like I came into working at my own company like in this idea that like my work life and my personal life are two totally separate things. Totally wrong. That was not true at all. That was 100% wrong. And I think that having more kind of like visibility around that and be accepting of the fact that like, yeah, I'm struggling right now, either physically, emotionally, or otherwise. And then the company being like, okay, like we understand that you're a human being, so these are the ways that we deal with that kind of situation. And it can be things that can be, you know, expensive and complicated for a company to do, or they can be very simple, like just having a creative, like welcoming environment. So
Yeah, I think it's
really
important to
awesome.
recognize that like it's not like you go to work on a video game and you just press a button and fun comes out. You know, it's not like a
What?
thing where you just show up and then you're like, I'm here pressing the button like Homer Simpson, and then
hard.
oh, look at all the fun that's coming out. Like it is really hard to be
Really
productive and creative and to do creative problem solving on the fly. And a lot of times when you're trying to solve a problem, it's a hard problem and you have opinions, and then you're trying to like solve it with other people who have opinions, and then it's not really fighting, but it's not really agreeing.
Yeah.
And like, you know, that's hard to do if you're in a grouchy mood because you just got a really wicked period cramp, or like you're going through a divorce or something, you know, or your kid kept you up all night, which is like all those things have happened at my studio. And it's like it's really important to recognize that like to do good creative work, you need to build in safety nets and flex time. And that's why scheduling takes longer and it is more expensive.
Yeah.
To run a sustainable studio costs money because it costs time and care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes is, in theory and practice, there's no difference between the two, but in practice there is. So you guys touched on this a little bit. So my next question is, so what is the creative vision for your studio, and how has this evolved over time?
Let's start with Siobhan.
So the vision for our studio is to focus on creative gaming. That's been our sort of shtick for a while. We just love the idea of getting people making stuff together. And so that kind of comes from the genesis of, you know, the early Commodore 64 days, all being makers and making little things when we were growing up. And so, yeah, we sort of, I think our company goal right at the beginning was like to make genre-defining console games, something that ended up being like boiled down to creative gaming.
Carol?
Yeah, Double Fine's vision is really to make creatively driven, deeply interesting puzzle narrative games that appeal to a broad market.
At Phenomena, I think the studio is trying to build next-generation gameplay for next-generation platforms. So we think of ourselves almost as a design studio that works on a variety of emerging hardware. And a lot of the stuff that we do is on in-flight hardware. So phones that haven't been released yet, headsets that haven't been released yet, stuff like the Mixer setup, which is like in the process of being developed. As it's getting developed, we'll be like, all right, let's make some really cool games for Mixer. Like, what does that technology enable in gameplay? And so we're kind of like hardcore nerds who also love really hardcore creativity. If you could put those two things together, I think that's what attracts a lot of people to the studio, is they want to do different things, but they don't want to just do them in the same way that we tend to do them, like just say on the PC. We want to work on a variety of platforms.
Yeah, so is that something that, like, when you were first founding the studio, you were really interested in, or do you think that that's something that's kind of because the opportunities have come up and it's something that's really, like, worked well with the team that you have, like, that you went in that direction, or?
Yeah, when we first started, actually, I was making this game with Keita Takahashi because he was like, well, this job that we have together isn't really that fun. Let's go start a studio and make a game together. I was like, all right, let's do that. So it was actually just like, let's make a console game. And then over time, just people that I knew in the industry were working on really cool stuff, and I would go and see the cool stuff, and then I'd be like, oh, you know, it would be a fun game. And so it sort of organically emerged from having friends that do creative research. And my background is in robotics and AI, so I've always been interested in bleeding edge technology. So I think it's it was something that occurred, and then as it was fun to do, we just went with it.
Yeah, I mean, Siobhan, did you find the same for, like, Media Molecule? Like, did you guys kind of go in with this vision that you really like, or did it kind of evolve as things were moving?
We sort of all came in as ourselves, so like that's one really you can't really change that. And so we, and we all had various different, interests in that sort of that crossover between like technology and art, technology and theatre, technology and human experience, technology and fun, technology and then sharing that. And so I know that, like, my background at Criterion was sort of, that I think of that as being this point where I was learning how to just make like a really amazing pop song. Like Burnout was an amazing experience to work on because it was just so visceral and fun. And at the Lionhead guys, like they had come from the Bullfrog world, which was very much about ground up design, bringing together technology and gameplay together. And I think that sort of together we had this idea of like wanting to tinker and sort of wanting to have some ground up and some top down and trying to figure out what the balance between the top down and ground up would be. And like my Criterion background was like shipping, we shipped lots of games in a day. It feels like now. But it was, so I think, that definitely came as part of that. And it was like starting with a group of friends. So like when you're starting as a group of friends like that, what you actually really want to do is create something that is full of joy, and you sort of, and you want it to have your personality in it. And I think that that's one of the core, real sort of important parts of Media Molecule is really important that everybody in the studio, it's a highly collaborative studio, that people really feel like the work that they're doing is appearing on the screen. And that's sort of, I guess, like, that's always been there right from the start.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I guess, Carol, for you, I mean, I know you haven't been in Double Fine through the whole length of the thing, but I mean, just for maybe the time, like your expectations going in versus how that has like evolved, as you move forward.
I think the interesting thing for me is that now that I've been there a while and I've started like playing a lot of the back catalog games that I hadn't played, is the broadness by which they, look at how they create their narratives. There's so many different genres that Double Fine's made games, and I didn't really think of it that way. I thought of them as like Tim's Adventure games, but then I've played like things like Headlander and Iron Brigade, and they're just like
amazing.
A variety of genres. So I think the interesting thing for me is the creative problem solving that the studio has can go in many different directions, because we do tend to encourage that creativity through things like Amnesia Fortnite.
So what would you like to see? Like, what is your vision for the future of the gaming industry? Like, what are your hopes that are around that? And I guess, if we want to start, we can start here and go that way.
I think my vision for the games industry is already happening. Like, I've been coming to E3 now since 1999, and I was just actually chatting with the person that helps run the show, and I was saying the show has become so different in the last
Yeah.
15, 18 years I've been coming, right? Like it's really changed. There are more women, there are more people of color. It's more open to the public. It's more accessible for people with a variety of physical configurations. And I think we're really classing it up in the games industry overall. And my vision for the future is to continue doing that until when people come to a games industry event, it's just the same as if you decided to go to a craft show in your local hometown, or to go to a convention of people that do theater or anything else. Like, it doesn't seem like a special or different kind of group. It's just a really incredibly creative, talented group of people that are hanging out together, and it should feel like we're all able to walk through it and get it and participate, and there's no barriers. And so I think it's, for me, that's just my vision for the whole world. Like, I would just like the world to be, I would like to increase the peace. So, but I think that we can do it in the industry ourselves, just through showing up and being here and being present in this space. So, and it's really encouraging to have this here and to be here with all of you lovely ladies as a result of that. So,
Oh, that's great.
I think for me, one of the things I was most excited about doing this panel was that I'm on the panel with a bunch of women leaders of companies, and that was cool. Like, I can't even imagine, like, 10 years ago being able to get this many women leaders on one panel, and that to me feels like part of the vision is that there's a little bit more equality on the panels, whether it's racial equality, gender equality, class division, and I really am hoping that that's a part of our future, because that's the game industry I want to be working in, and that's the game industry I hope I'm trying to build.
Great.
Awesome answers. I think I really would like to see more games and more studios being run by a more diverse group of people. Like, I talked to Robin a lot about the fact that, you meeting other female CEOs is actually really tough, and I want that, like you do. I love the idea of us thinking
Yes.
about, like, how does that evolve? Creative directors, again, that's another thing. Like, seeing
and funders too.
funders.
I want there to be more funds driven by women. I want there to be more women on stage at big E3 announcements talking about their
Absolutely.
games. Like Cornelia Gephardt, she was like she slayed at the E3 announcement for her game. And I feel like if you look at Sea of Solitude, it's a perfectly amazing example of a game that, like, it totally comes from her experience, and she's so creative and so amazing. And she's got a whole career ahead of her. She's gotten started at like level 99. She's already at level 99. She's just going up, and I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. I was going to say, I guess, to share a little bit of my vision like that. I also agree on all of those points. Like, that's the stuff that I would like to see. I guess for me, in a more kind of like immediate sense, is like, how do we make all these things more sustainable for it to be easier for people to come in and exist in this industry and, like, to really make it? Because I primarily work with independent game developers, and so they're really struggling, like, to financially support themselves and support the people around them. And then if you don't come from a situation where you have somebody externally from you supporting you, or somebody helping to cover your health care, or you don't live in a country where that's possible, or whatever the situations are, it becomes really complicated and difficult for anybody new to, like, break in.
But I think this is, like, part of another aspect of what does need to keep evolving is, like, how game studios are run.
Yeah.
Like, there has to, like, what we were talking about in terms of, like, the care and effort we put into people, that isn't everywhere.
Yeah.
And, like, we particularly put effort in there because we know what you're talking about is real, and it doesn't really matter what part of the industry you're in. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, I agree.
And so as we, as the industry evolves, and as we expect more and more and more from people, we have to be there to help them, to support them through. And I think the leadership of the games industry has to really think about, like, how we continue that forward. And I know we were talking a little bit about, like, HR and stuff like that, like, things like taking it's not a garage industry anymore. Like, it's not like, it's not this small thing that's going to go away. Like, it's going to continue to grow and continue to evolve, and so therefore we have a responsibility to shepherd it in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that having more visibility around that, more people talking about it, having it be more part of the conversation is the thing that I really hope for the games industry, and it's moving in that direction. So it's like, in some ways, the things that I'm hoping for are actually manifesting themselves, which is really amazing. So, and then to kind of just wrap this up, and kind of on this note, things to make the future kind of a better place. So just kind of go down the line and have everybody give, like, a shout out to, like, a particular person or an initiative or something that you think is like, they're really fighting the good fight, or they're helping to make the differences that you really want to see kind of be happening in the future. So we'll start on the end.
Can I have two?
Yeah, you can say as many
Fine.
as you want. Yeah, all of
Okay,
them.
yeah. So I really love the work that the Prince's Trust does in the UK. Moody Molecule is based in the UK, so that is a really brilliant charity that does a lot for young people in teaching them sort of life lessons and skills so that they can learn to make pathways to earn. Which is very
It's a
catchy.
good motto. It's great.
And then I really love the work that Layla from Girls Make Games is doing.
Yes,
and,
that was
the
gonna be
work
mine.
she's doing with
She's
Sony.
amazing.
Yeah,
Sony,
she's
so,
super great.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a shout out to a Bay Area group, San Francisco Bay Area group called Gameheads. It is a group that works with youth of color and lower income youth in the Bay Area to try and use game development to teach them skills, everything from game design to DevOps, to give them opportunities that they might not have otherwise had in their lives. It's a really fun one because actually game developers end up as mentors and meet very regularly with their mentees and end up having a great game show at the end of their cycle. So, you apply, you're in the cohort, you get all of this experience, you get to meet all of these experienced game devs that help you, understand what a path for you could look like. And I think for me, the really important piece of that is a lot of times we talk about the racial inequality, but the class inequality and the class division is something that doesn't get addressed as much as I'd like it to see it addressed. So go
Yeah.
Gameheads.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Gameheads is amazing, and I'm also a Bay Area person, so I'll just nod on that because it's true. They're amazing. And Kelly and I talk about this a lot. Like if you come from a financially underprivileged background and you've had scarcity in your history, it can be very difficult to just suddenly show up and make decisions and be the boss and like just do it. Like you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of internal narratives about not being good enough or not having enough that can lead to scarcity thinking. And that really, if there's one thing that kills creativity in a studio context, it's this idea of scarcity that like there'll never be enough or what if we fail? Like those kind of fears just stop creative minds from working. One of the another Bay Area group that I want to give a shout out to is called Code for America. Our friend Jen Palka runs a group of people that's a volunteer-based organization that's funded by a lot of different technical partners in the Bay Area. But what they do is they take designers who are mid-career from a variety of institutions. They can come from games, they can come from tech, they can come from anywhere. And then they put them into American cities and they work on websites and software initiatives to help the people of those cities survive better. So they'll, for example, rework a food stamp system, or they'll go in and deal with like, there's a really bad parking ticket or speeding ticket payment system, which causes a lot of people to end up on the books and then get arrested for unpaid tickets. And like that leads to a massive amount of incarceration of people of color. And so they just go into these places and they volunteer for a year and they work with a city like Detroit, or they go down to Florida, or they go up, upstate New York, wherever they are. And they try to make a measurable concrete difference in the governance of that location through software. And I think that that is such a fantastic idea. I mean, we're already automating so many jobs, and there are so many people that are struggling to find work. That kind of work is really great, and I've been hoping actually that maybe someone out there right now, will start a similar group for the environment. I think you could easily do an environment corps like the Peace Corps, where you work together with other people to either clean up environmental sites or come up with ways to make the world a healthier place. And I think that those kinds of initiatives are going to become really popular in the future, especially with young people, because it's harder and harder to find paid work, doing the thing where you press the button. Robots can do that. So I guess if there's one thing I would say, it's that, games is one of those areas too. We can all make games that help solve creative problems in the world, and think about our games as ways of looking at systems. And so, everyone listening and everyone out on the internet has the potential to change the world to be a better place, and specifically through using your creative problem solving. So it's really fantastic to have that opportunity now.
Well, and this is one of the things why I actually think it's really important to be advocating for this kind of stuff in the games industry, because for me, the games industry, like I call it like a gateway drug, but it gets people interested in the language of the future, which is coding and technology. And so like if somebody gets their interest piqued by, I could make a game, or I could do something fun or creative, and then it leads to doing something like, revamping a website for food stamps, or making a social media platform that is like actually cool and people want to hang out at, or like making the world a better place, because a lot of this technology is made by people who come from the same experiences, who have the same background, who don't really and they're making the technology that is shaping the world. And so I think from games we can kind of work that from the ground up a bit.
Absolutely.
You know?
Amen. Yes.
Yeah. And like for me, any kind of program where you provide some sort of mentorship is super important, because the thing for me, like I grew up in a very like economically disadvantaged household is a fancy, nice way to say like we had no money, you know, and like having people that were mentors for me and just lived a life that I felt that I could actually aspire to, or that, you know, like I went into chemistry because I had a chemistry teacher who like made her own soaps and aspirin and like had kids and lived on a farm and all this weird stuff, and I didn't even know that scientists did that kind of stuff, and just her living her life was enough of an inspiration for me that it got the kind of wheels turning that I was like, oh yeah, that's possible for me too. So you know, it doesn't have to be a big giant crazy thing. It can be. Like I had one of the people who went through the Mega Boot just started an elementary school.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
Right? So like you can do those things. Like if you don't see these programs, you know, like it's possible to do this stuff, and you don't always need a lot of resources. You just need a passion and people who want to help you. So yeah. So anyway, so thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you, Kelly. You're amazing. You're all amazing. Keep it up.
Love you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone.